It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy the grind.
Welcome to the Hockey Writers Grindline. I'm your host, Patrick Brown. Joining me as always is, our Grindline's captain, Devin Little. And we are truly lucky again to be joined by one of our favorite experts, managing editor of Access Hockey MI, joining us again, Rachel Anderson. Rachel, how are you?
Hello, I am fantastic. How are you?
Doing great. Really
Good.
Appreciate you taking time out to join us and talk some hockey. So
Yeah.
Grateful for you to be on. Before we get started, we here at the Hockey Writers Grindline would like to offer our sincere condolences to Matisse Kivlenieks, his family, friends, the Columbus Blue Jackets, the NHL, and truly the entire hockey world. We are so very sorry for your loss, what you're experiencing, and we share your grief. So now turning to Red Wings news, GM Steve Yzerman made a hire last week, and we weren't really able to talk about it because we were going through our first annual Grindy Awards, which had a lot of fun. And if you haven't checked it out yet, and Rachel, I don't know if you've checked it out yet, but we had some fun. So make sure you check it out. But let's talk about the mysterious assistant coach hiring of Alex Tanguay, ladies and gentlemen. If there's a name that Red Wings fans from the mid to late 90s and early 2000s didn't expect to hear, probably, it was Alex Tanguay. And kind of off the grid a little bit. He doesn't have a ton of coaching experience. Assistant coach at the Iowa Wild. Shout out to my Des Moines peeps out there. Just a couple of years experience as an assistant coach. Had a solid power play. I believe they were ranked 5th, something to that effect. Second best shots per game percentage both years of him being an assistant coach. So obviously Yzerman's thinking offense, right? But does it work? Is this a good hiring? What do you think? And Rachel, guests first, please. What do you think about this hiring of Alex Tanguay?
Honestly, I was a little caught off guard by it because Alex, having history in the NHL, and obviously it's kind of born of rivalry. If you know anything about Colorado and Detroit, you know this might not work very well. So the beautiful thing about him, though, is that his work in the AHL underneath Tim Army so far in the last couple of seasons with Iowa has been impeccable. And I often say that coaches and broadcasters and players, they all develop similarly, where they do have to take those leaps when starting and coaching and going from the AHL to the NHL. It is going to be a little bit of a shock for him, I think, though he understands the pace of the NHL. Understanding the playmaking and how fast it has to go will be a little bit of a stumbling block, I think, but he has the vision for it. He has the patience for it. And I think he's very creative with it, which is what brought Iowa to being 5th. And they were not even a team in contention for a Calder Cup a few seasons back. So it goes to show just how much effort has been put in tandem with Army and making this happen. And so I think, with Detroit, I think it's a good hire. It'll be an interesting experience to see how Blashill has had to transition from an AHL mindset to NHL mindset. Sure. It's going to be similar, but I think he's got a little bit more edge than Blash does. So I think it'll be a really nice complementary pair there.
There's some really good quotes from Alex on just the past week or so, talking about if you would have told anybody this 20 some years ago, he probably would have been exiled, but it seems like everybody's pretty open. I mean, obviously that rivalry isn't what it once was, but
it's not dead, though.
You still remember. You'll always remember. And Devin, do you remember?
I certainly do. Yes. What a pivot. Wow.
Yeah, thanks. It's like I've done this before. I don't know.
We're seasoned pros at this point. Anyways, so I've got a couple of bullet points I want to kind of touch on real quick with this hire. One, in talking with Jeff Blashill when he was talking with the media about this hire, something that he really kind of kept going back to was his ability to work with individual players. He's not really expecting Tanguay to come in here and reinvent the wheel per se. He's expecting him to come in and work with the individual players on how to prosper more within the system that they already have, and maybe, refine that system. And I think that's where his experience in the NHL and his the fruits of his successful career will really come into play.
Mm-hmm.
I look at guys like Larkin, Zadina, the playmakers on this roster, and I imagine that they're going to see a nice little boost from having a guy like Alex Tanguay there to kind of whisper in their ear and say, hey, why don't you try this instead of this? So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes of that. And then the second point I want to make, if you go back to when we talked to Iggy, one of the points he made about why his dad wouldn't necessarily make a good assistant coach was that he was a successful player. He has cup rings. He, he had a very successful career. Alex Tanguay, despite the fact that he was on those Avalanche teams, he had a successful career. He had over 800 points. He has a cup ring. He very much fits that mold of a successful player that you almost wonder that maybe players might be more interested in what he has to say than what Blashill has to say. So if that holds true, that's something to kind of keep an eye on. And I mean, for Tanguay's sake, I'm sure he would like to see the team kind of really buy into what he's selling.
Despite the fact that he played on those Avalanche teams. Yes. I love that you kind of dropped that in there. That's well done. That's well done.
I remember.
A nice bookend. That's good picture and catch right there. I like it.
It's like we've been doing this a while.
Super good perspectives. I don't really have anything intelligent to add. I know it's stunning, but seriously, Rachel, kind of like what you said, it was a surprise of all the names that were kind of floating around out there. Especially after Seattle brought in Hackstol and there's some other names that were still out there. A bit of a surprise, but I think everybody, at least on this immediate podcast, agrees. I think we've got enough evidence here to trust the Yzerplan and trust what GM Steve Yzerman sees in Tanguay, and we'll see how it pans out. So I'm excited to see a flurry of offensive talent next year.
Not to mention his head of hair or lack thereof is definitely fits in with what we're going for here in Detroit.
Leave it to you to bring up the hair game.
Yeah, Devin. I had to.
I love it. So, all right, the Red Wings have their bench bosses, if you will, shored up. So let's talk a little draft. Let's talk about, we'll start with, and again, we kind of brought this up last week, but Keith Petruzzelli no longer with the team. Personally, I don't know how much of a hole that actually creates in the goaltending situation, but I'm not the expert here. And Rachel, I'd actually like to pick your brain on this first, because the question is, what does his departure mean, if anything? And does that mean now that the Red Wings definitely need to make sure they're focusing on a goalie in the upcoming draft?
I'm probably going to offend some people when I say it doesn't make a hole, because Keith Petruzzelli, however outstanding he has been with Quinnipiac and however outstanding his career will be, he never actually entered the Detroit system. He's never actually participated with any of our teams. Therefore, he doesn't actually leave an empty spot. What he does leave is a good opportunity for the other goaltenders we have. A lot of people forget that we have a lot of goalies that are almost ready. Victor Brädström is ready. He's coming over. We've got Carter Geilander. Jan Bednash is going to be here in like 2 or 3 seasons. So we have goaltenders coming through the pipeline, and it's very strategic over the next 3 to 4 seasons. So with Petruzzelli, moving on to free agency, and in the beginning, Detroit did maintain his rights. They had rights to him, so it was up to them to release him or not. So people forget too that there's a lot of agents and also the brass working on this. It's not just suddenly he decides to quit. But I don't think that Detroit's draft perspective should necessarily be honed in on a goaltender. Yes, we need them for future considerations, but we're not going to draft a goalie who's going to be NHL ready. That's not how goalies work. And when they do, it's few and far between. Amazing, but it doesn't always happen. So I think with Petruzzelli leaving, and I wish him all the best, he's an amazing player. We have other guys that can take advantage of this opportunity and get those looks. The prospect pool for goaltenders is pretty small. So they have some stiff competition between each other, but there's a lot of them that they're ready to go. And Petruzzelli's departure is just going to, I think, expedite that a little bit.
I love that you took a literal stance of no, it doesn't leave a hole because he was never in the system.
There is no hole.
You were most definitely a lawyer in another life, Ray. So I have no doubt.
I can't lie well enough to be a lawyer.
Devin, your thoughts on Petruzzelli's departure and what that means for the Red Wings?
I mean, it's a little disappointing for sure. I know coming out of that 2017 draft, he was arguably the player I was most excited about, and that was the same draft that they got Michael Rasmussen 9th overall in. But like Rachel just said, if he never signed a contract with the Red Wings, he was never technically in the system to begin with. So it's sad, but at the same time, you're crying over nothing essentially. Do I to
Draw mild
to address the what this might mean for the draft? I think that I don't want to say it changes things because I don't think it does. I don't think that this happening really makes Yzerman think, oh wow, and now I got to really go out and get a goalie. But I do think it kind of highlights that there is no goalie that is like knocking on the door, and we already knew that. But everyone was kind of looking at Petruzzelli as like that next guy. He was going to come to Grand Rapids next season and try to really announce himself as a prospect, and now that's not going to happen. So I think that the Red Wings will draft a goalie in this draft. I don't know if it's going to be in the first round, the second round, whatever. I just think it's kind of in their best interest to do that and keep adding prospects at the position until someone finally shows up and really announces themselves. But as far as Petruzzelli's impact on that, I don't think that he really increases the need to draft a goalie so much so that they have to now go out and draft Jesper Wallstedt.
Absolutely. I think that last point you made is fantastic. If his departure doesn't create the need, and to that point, I think the need has been there for quite some time. So we'll see.
Realistically, the need's always there for goaltenders in every team.
Sure.
So it's draft one.
Absolutely.
If you can.
And now it's a matter of, and Devin, your last point to agree with, there's going to be a goalie taken at some point in the draft. It's just a matter of where. I made no secret in recent weeks of where I hope that goalie goes, and I say number 6, but a lot of people disagree with me, and I respect the disagreement and the logic. But let's stay on the draft for a minute. We just talked about goaltending. I think it's kind of a consensus here that goaltending doesn't need to be a focus in the draft. What about the offense or the defense? Is there any area that the Red Wings desperately need to address in this year's draft? And Rachel, again, we'll start with you.
I think it's going to sound like a cop-out to say everything, but I always think, especially in recent seasons, Detroit needs to load up in every single position. We have a lot of skilled defensemen and forwards and all that coming through the pipeline. Several of them, I think, are ready to make that jump in the next season or two. But looking at the draft, we do need a very offensive team, especially with kind of a shift in mentality from rebuilding to now hopefully being semi-built and pushing a little bit more towards the scoring and the offensive prowess, if you will. I think it would be good to draft a few more guys that are a little faster, edgier, kind of get that grit back in the team too. Just that kind of, creative but physical player. And that's not something we've seen in Detroit in a long time. And we see it with Giovanni Smith, but he's not quite there yet. Right. But getting a group of guys coming through that can be those grinders and be just as good as the first line and just have that consistency throughout and keep that momentum going. So yeah, edgy and fast, preferably.
I know we're going to talk about this at a later time, Devin, in a show that's a little bit closer to the draft. But Rachel, I don't know if we're going to have you on, so I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Do it.
Who do you take at 6?
I want Eklund.
All right, I like it. I had to put you on the spot. Do you have 22?
No, you're good.
Do you have 22 figured out yet?
Not yet. I will on Tuesday.
Right. So we'll check it out. But I just had to ask because I don't know if we're going to have you on again before the draft. So we will. We'll ask you Tuesday. Yeah. Devin, your thoughts on not so much goaltending, but offense, defense. Is there a blaring need that Yzerman needs to address in this year's draft?
To Rachel's point, the Red Wings aren't at a position right now where they can really draft for positional need. They kind of just need to get good players. We just talked about how they need goalies, so that's obviously a thing that they do need to get. But I don't think that, like I said, that I don't think that means they have to go out and get Wallstead. I think that they need to get players that have that edge, like Rachel said. I think that it would be nice to find Sider, kind of a guy that you point to and go, that's going to be his partner into the future. But I don't know if that guy's going to end up being there. It'd also be nice to get another top 6 center to potentially either go right underneath Larkin in the lineup or even potentially overtake him as the top center. I know in our mock draft we did this week, I took Mason McTavish with pick 6. And I think that he does check a lot of boxes for what the Red Wings need. He's a solid offensive center, big kid. I compare him to Ryan O'Reilly, has that two-way game. I think like I said, I think he checks a lot of boxes. But as I've said in previous episodes, there's like 10 dudes that I could look at in this draft and be like, yeah, that'll work.
For sure.
McTavish is just one of them.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's a huge call out right there. Even Owen Power, who's presumed to be the first overall pick, boom, point made, presumed. There is no definite even number one pick that you can single out. So it's hard to say what you can address, what needs you can address. I made no secret of I don't claim to ever try to be a good GM. I'm not great at that game, but in my casual observations that people will probably lament in the comments, please comment. I feel like the Wings are at a point in the rebuild where the cupboard's pretty well stocked. Some of it's going to pan out, some of it's not. I think you take the best available player, and then depending on how things are going, you can address, Devin, to your point, Sider's pairing mate through free agency or a trade, even at that point. I think, in my opinion, you take the best available, and depending on how Yzerman has that ranked, or how Draper has that ranked, or whoever, you address the rest. Then you see how these pan out, you develop, and you can start addressing some of those other holes through free agency in the next few years. So that's my take. I've never claimed to be a good GM.
You're hired.
Well, we will see. But I appreciate the vote of confidence. That means a lot.
My beer league needs a GM.
Might be able to do that job. Lead by example, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Really good stuff. Let's take a quick time out, pay some bills. Thank you so much for watching our show. Give us a like and subscribe to the Hockey Writers channel. There is so much good stuff on here. We've got Blackhawks banter, Sabres scoop, Chicks and Sticks, and as always, the OG Hockey Writers Live with Mark Shig. Follow us on Twitter. Sign up for our morning newsletter. Get the very best hockey news delivered to you. We've got, Spotify, iHeartRadio. If you want us to send you a telegram, we'll send you a telegram. So however you want to get your hockey news. Also, be sure to follow Rachel at Access Hockey MI and check out their YouTube channel as well. There's super good stuff. I think you guys just did something on Eklund that I really enjoyed a couple weeks ago. So make sure you check that out as well. And thanks for watching. We appreciate it. So let's move on, shift gears a little bit, but keep it with the Wings for now. And what I would like to first talk about is heading into next season. Are there any players on the roster who you feel like, okay, this is the year they need to make that leap? They need to have a solid year. Are there players who need to? Are there players who you expect to potentially take that next step? So curious, and we've put Rachel on the spot every time. So Devin, we're going to start with you this time.
Haha.
It's okay. I prepped for this. I have two names in mind. Last year, the player I had in mind was Michael Rasmussen, and by golly, he did it. Mm-hmm. This year, I would have, or next season, I guess, I'm going to say Dennis Cholowski again, and I would have said him this season too, but he hasn't taken that step. I think this is very much a make it or break it year for Dennis Cholowski, assuming that he's still with the Red Wings going into next season. And then besides him, the other player, I call it we'll say big step, but not in the same way that Cholowski. And I'm going to say Philip Zadina. Sure. I'm looking for Zadina to become a line driver, line carrier, whatever you want to call it. I don't see him doing that on the first line quite yet, But if he can be on that second line and be the catalyst of everything that happens on that line, that's a big step for him. We talked about it last week where he's really added that element of playmaking to his game. But what was missing this year was his ability to score goals. And that was his calling card when he got drafted. So if he can put it all together and score goals and create them, he can be a damn good hockey player. And I want to see him become that next season. I'm looking for, 20 goals, maybe 50 points, maybe even upwards of 60 if things roll real well.
Wow.
But yes, I want to see him. It is high hopes. I'm not going to bet the bank on it, but like I said, I just want to see him become that line driver.
To your earlier point there, Devin, too, Zadina literally called attention on draft day to his goal scoring ability. So
that's with pucks.
So, I mean, playmaking, great. I thought he took crazy good steps. Seemed like he was always making something happen, but definitely want to see those pucks in the back of the net. Rachel, your thoughts on who's due or who needs to be due? Who needs to step up?
I swear Devin stole my notes. Because I was going to say that Jalowski is on the bubble. Like he was on the bubble last season. I honestly think he's going to get exposed for the draft or for the expansion. And if he doesn't, I think he's moving on, but that's a whole nother thing. But I feel like for him, if he does not take this leap, he's as good as done in Detroit. He's had a lot of opportunity and he did not measure up to that. And I think a lot of that has to do with just him not understanding the urgency behind him needing to execute. It's not, you have 3 seasons, your 3 seasons are up and it's either now or never. And as far as Zadina, he was actually on my top of my list here, that I've had distinct honor of watching him since he got drafted and pulled over, and watching him grow into a much more confident player has been wonderful. And he early on, he battled injury, and even last season, the season before, he had some injuries he had to work through, and he pushed back and he fought back and he did great. And he still had some really good production. I would love to see him just come out guns blazing this season and just not slow down. Because he has the skill, he has the confidence and the ability. And I think the overall ambition to be that top line guy. And I really just, I guess on a personal side of things, seeing from where he was to what he is now, I see so much more in him. And I would just love for him just to push beyond that precipice and just keep moving and just be that top line guy and really make Larkin wonder if his job is safe. Like I want him to push that hard to make him nervous. And sure. I think he will. He's been on that trajectory. And I really think this season's going to be a huge season for him.
I think so. We can call it a hat trick because I think we all agree on both Jalowski and Zadina. And I totally agree, Rachel. I think it's his last chance. Jalowski, not Zadina.
Yeah.
Wait,
I thought we agreed.
It's time. Put on your big boy pants.
You voted for him for most improved player.
That's true. Yeah. It's time. Let's see what you can do, and hopefully, I love the kid, and I think he can do some really good things quarterbacking that blue line. So we'll see. One other name to throw out there, just because neither one of you said it, and I'd really personally like to see this. We've mentioned him a few times tonight. Giovanni Smith would be great to see him play well enough to get a regular spot, even just as a role player, provide a little grit, provide some tenacity and some courage, as we were talking about.
Got heart.
Yeah, absolutely. And if that's one thing that's very, very difficult to defend against, it's heart. So I'd love to see him take a leap, and I feel like it's a good opportunity. There's a good season to see him do that. So we'll see, but really good stuff. Good points there. Let's talk about the rumor mill then, because we're talking about people who may be able to take that leap. And maybe, just maybe, there will be even more spots to do so, because lately, Twitter at least has been aflame with rumors that Toronto specifically is quite interested in Tyler Bertuzzi and potentially making some calls about him. So that's a pretty interesting development, considering, stating the obvious, he hardly played last year. 9 games, I think, and 5 goals in 9 games, something like that. So solid player, but hardly played, and Yzerman's getting some calls on him. So let's entertain this rumor mill for a minute. Rachel, let's start with you. You're back on the hot seat. What do you think about What do you think about Bertuzzi potentially landing in Toronto, or anywhere else, considering he's still got a sign? He's still an RFA with the Wings. So what do you make of all this?
I would not be brokenhearted. Again, Bert, love the kid to death. He's a great player, but long term, I don't think he fits with the plan of the team and the overall vision that we're going for. He's not even considering the injury he battled last season, because it's not common. I mean, he won a Calder Cup with 2 broken fingers. Like, hockey players fight through stuff. It happens. Sure. But I think with the scope and the style of team that Yzerman is trying to create, yes, we need that grit, but we also need a guy who can consistently produce and also develop and mature. I haven't seen Bertuzzi mature as a player. His game has remained the same, and it's different than consistency. To me, it's almost like he's in a rut. And the fact that there was arbitration potentially, anything with arbitration bugs me. And I hated it with Athanasiou. I hated it with Fedorov. I hate arbitration. But with that, I think Toronto, he might fit in Toronto. I think they would take a bag of potatoes if someone said that it would win the Stanley Cup, but not saying Bertuzzi's a bag of potatoes, but I think we could get a good price for him. And if we've got all this other talent, we don't really have time to waste on guys who just don't want to grow with the team.
Sure.
And it sounds really heartless because he is a good player, just might not be for us.
Yeah. And I actually don't see it as heartless at all. I see it as logical, to be honest. And that's another thing. And okay, let the comments roll. I'm ready for him this week, I promise. But I've even got doom and gloom lighting going right now. I mean, in the past, we talked about potentially moving Bertuzzi even just down to the second line. This was like before the season started, and some folks take that pretty personally. So
they tend to get upset.
Yeah,
it just happens.
But he's, like you said, he's a replaceable, or he's love him to death, but he's a replaceable player. He is a replaceable player. And if you can get a good return for him, I don't see any reason to not do it. But Devin, your thoughts on the Tyler Bertuzzi rumor mill?
Real quick, our viewers are very vocal about how much they like you, Rachel, but I feel like that might change after that. So
it's not a popularity contest.
But
I am so sorry.
But no, in all seriousness, I don't remember which episode it was. I think it was following the trade deadline. We were talking about how Anthony Mantha just kind of didn't fit the timeline that the Red Wings were on. And I think Anthony Mantha is a better player than Tyler Bertuzzi, and they are the same age. So if Anthony Mantha can be traded, Tyler Bertuzzi damn well can be traded. Yep. I love Tyler Bertuzzi too. He brings a lot of things that I think playoff teams need, and I wish the Red Wings were in the playoffs because I think he'd really shine. But unfortunately, that's just not where they're at right now. And what they need is draft picks and prospects. And from the sounds of things, Toronto would be willing to definitely give some pretty pennies for Tyler Bertuzzi, and they're not the only team that fits that description. It's funny. A couple weeks ago, we had talked about potentially including Bertuzzi in a Morgan Rielly trade. That was kind of fun, going off of an article that a THW writer wrote. As much as I love Morgan Rielly, I think it makes more sense to trade for picks and prospects. And but I don't know. I'm very much on board the trade Tyler Bertuzzi train. I believe that he'll be gone by the deadline, because quite frankly, Yzerman's already shown that he has no personal attachment to anybody. If he thinks that the deal on the table is going to help the team in the long run, he's going to take it.
Absolutely. Well, so what? There'd be no Bertuzzi and Cholowski for Marner and Rielly. You don't think that would happen straight up? No. I already told you my GM skills, so it seems reasonable to me.
Keep it to beer league.
Got it. Message received.
You got to know your bounds, man.
Stay in your lane. Bad pass. Bad.
Exactly.
Good stuff. We'll see what happens with that. It's it's super interesting situation with Bertuzzi this offseason, considering what happened last year. So we'll see what Yzerman does. But speaking of the Red Wings GM, who is no stranger to making bold moves. Well, let's talk about some of those bold moves as the architect of the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just repeated as Stanley Cup champions. How do we feel about the fact that the man who built that team is now at the helm of the Red Wings? And what type of hope should that offer Red Wings fans, if any? Rachel, your thoughts?
I feel like I should have something to aggressively point on as well while I'm doing this. That's awesome. I'll just do it. I'll pantomime. But I think it should give Red Wings fans a lot of confidence. Obviously, he was a part of our just massive win streak and franchise and our back-to-back wins as well. And now seeing that and then creating that in Tampa and years later, seeing it finally come to fruition in back-to-back wins, that team was not created overnight. And I think when people see like, oh, Tampa won it again, it's not a small feat. And that was something that was years and years in the making. So if you transplant over to Detroit, that's his vision. His vision is to get the cut back in Detroit. And he's proven, even from a distance, that he can create that. But the thing with Tampa winning again is they've won without Yzerman. He's not their GM anymore. He's created a culture that can sustain and keep that momentum up and keep that development up. And they see the potential within their developmental leagues and they're utilizing that. And it's now showing. So we have to remember that, yes, Steve can create it, but the coaching staff and the front office staff that and the culture that he creates around that will lead us forward to Stanley Cup championships, even when he is gone, because he's not going to be with us forever. I would love it, but he's not going to. He'll probably retire out of us. So that's where I'm. He's not going to leave. He's just going to retire or join the team again. But I think that should give people a lot of confidence and excitement, because it's a sustainable winning culture. And that is what he's creating with us.
I do not necessarily see him rejoining the team, but that would be amazing. That
would be so cool.
Maybe if I point enough, make it happen.
Show those kids what's up. Let's show them how to play.
I love it. Devin, your thoughts on what's transpiring in Tampa Bay, and does that offer Red Wings fans some hope?
I think Rachel made a really good point. I think it honestly speaks volumes to Yzerman that they are doing this after he's gone. Obviously, for his sake, you would have liked to have seen them get it done with him at the helm. But the fact that he left behind something that was sustainable, let's not forget, Julian Breezeball, who is their GM now, that was his right-hand man the whole time he was there. So I think, the last thing he did that really impacted that organization was leaving that organization in capable hands. And I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't do the exact same for the Red Wings. How can you not be excited? We were talking about being excited about what Yzerman was doing with Tampa Bay before they repeated. And now they've repeated. And it's just a matter of time. To Rachel's point, it did not happen overnight. Yzerman inherited Stamkos and Hedman, and those are two big pieces that he did not inherit with Detroit. So, you can't even look at Tampa Bay's timeline and be like, all right, so it took them 8 years. It's going to take the Red Wings 8 years. No, it's going to take them. It might take them even longer than that, because he's got to get those Stamkoses and Hedmans too.
I don't know. We got Sider, so that's close, right?
That's
you give it a few years.
Exactly. Hopefully, he can get a Braden Point this year. That'd be really nice.
Yeah.
But it's just it's not even just what he did with the product on the ice. Tampa Bay is a hockey town now. Tampa Bay is a legitimate hockey city that, with no disrespect to the Florida Panthers, that is Florida's team. And the impact that this repeat championship that the Lightning just sealed on the hockey scene in the state of Florida is going to be massive. And to be able to do that is going to be a big check on the resume of Steve Yzerman.
Absolutely.
Like I said, how can you not be excited about this?
Of course. And I think so. What I took from that first is we're going to have Point, Marner, and Riley next year on the Red Wings, right? So that's happening.
We got to find a Vasilevsky though too.
Well, and that's amen. That was exactly what I was going to say. Was
goaltending was on point.
And you talk about what he did with Bishop, and some people were scratching their heads. And well, what did he do? He drafted a Conn Smythe winner. That's what he did. He drafted a Conn Smythe winner.
In the world.
Arguably could have been the Vezina winner this year as well. And remember what he did with Bishop and everything. People were scratching their heads. So he's not afraid to make the bold move. Yeah.
What round was Vasilevsky drafted in?
What round was Vasilevsky drafted?
The first.
That was a leading question.
Yeah, I was like, I see you were setting me up, and I just went. There it went. Okay.
If there's ever an argument for drafting goalies in the first round, there it is.
Jasper. I like it. Man, you set me up, and I whiffed on
Point
it.
taken.
Braden point taken. Now it's all coming.
There you go. See, you picked it right back up. You're good.
I really like it. I think that was a perfect way to end that, Devin. How could you not be excited, right? You'd be living under a rock if you didn't see all the success and at least be like, oh, cool, he's running our team now. That
and he's running the team that he became famous with too. He had every reason to want to do this in Detroit.
This is his legacy team, and that's how he's going to leave the sport, I think.
There's a mural of him up in LCA. Like, come on.
This is his legacy team. I absolutely love that quote. I love that quote. That's awesome. So let's keep it focused on just necessarily this past season for one more segment. And this is how we're going to close our show. Season's over, guys. I'm sorry. There's no more hockey.
Womp womp.
NHL's over. That's a bummer. We're going to have a fun July. We've got expansion drafts and entry drafts, free agency. So July will be fun for sure. But
development camp, training camp. There's so much to look forward to.
I didn't mean to miss out on that.
Come on.
Man. Ow. So, but let's talk about the season that was for a minute and your takeaways. What an interesting season from start to finish. I actually kind of feel like the season kind of followed the trajectory of the pandemic almost. It was very unsure. We didn't even know if there was going to be a season. Then the NBA defined theirs, and it's like, come on, NHL, what are you doing? They finally got it together. There was a season. There were no fans. Then things started getting a little bit better. Some fans started coming in and watching the game, and then you had like the spectacle in Tampa Bay in the final, which was a sold out arena and gave me goosebumps. It was super cool to watch just the players be able to celebrate with the fans. So what did you take away from this season, start to finish? Rachel, the good, the bad, the ugly, anything in between? Your thoughts?
It was a roller coaster, to say the least. I think the biggest and most prominent thing just kind of encompasses the sport of hockey. And I don't want to sound like overly diplomatic about it or anything, but it just showed how hockey specifically worldwide came together to not only place players and help them continue on with their dreams, with their development and with the sport that they love, but also try accommodating the situation the world was in. And I think that just goes to show just how adaptable hockey players are. They can mesh with any situation and still come out winning a Stanley Cup back to back, going from the pandemic Stanley Cup winners to now, we're out of it and they win again. It just shows that the hard work really does pay off. And no matter what is going on globally, it's a sense of unity, I think, too, where hockey fans and players, they can all still come together and know their sport is unifying them. And again, it's outside of the political stuff and the worldwide stuff, but to me, it was just really cool to see the players value even more the fan experience, the game that they love, and the ability to go to the arena every day. And it sounds overly emotional, I think, or maybe a little sensitive, but what can I say? I get sensitive about hockey, but it was just really cool. And it is a tearjerker to see them come through and still have the Stanley Cup, still have the celebration and everything encompassing it, and just growing. And I think from here on out, it's going to teach them and future players how to appreciate it more. Not that they didn't, but I don't think they're going to take it for granted anymore.
Well, this is a safe space. There is no judging about being sensitive about hockey here, rest assured. So
it's the only thing I really get sensitive about. So
you could put Yzerman's Game 7 winner. You could put it on right in front of me right now, and I just start bawling. So it's cool. There's no judgment.
McCarty's overtime goal where he jumps into the boards and then everyone freaks out. Oh, gets me every time.
Colorado, was that March 26th? That one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
remember that?
A little bit.
Tying Colorado back into it.
Now, Tanguay, come on.
I remember.
Let's just say I'm not getting his face tattooed on me anytime soon.
What I really thought what you said, Rachel, which was a really good point, was about Tampa's back-to-back. Every round of the playoffs, I kind of thought they're going to run out of gas. Yeah. They played more than anybody, and they had such a short off season, and they're going to run out of gas. Now, it helped that Kucherov sat the whole year, but regardless, I thought they were right.
That's a whole
well within
thing.
the rules. Well within the rules, but I thought they were going to run out of gas, and the fact that they they won in 5, crazy. So Devin, what did you, sorry, I took a left turn for a minute, but I'm coming back. What's your thoughts on the season, your takeaways? What did you learn this year?
Our conversations are always roundabouts. We wasn't a back road.
Just bunny trails.
But we're back roads. We like taking the back roads to get there. Okay, it's cool.
What I took from this season, like Rachel said, I think you really, this isn't just hockey, but we're talking about hockey here, so I digress. But you really see the impact that fans have on the game. Hockey, the sport itself, is exciting. It's the fastest game in the world. People fall in love with the game. They don't necessarily fall in love with the experience. But part of the experience is having fans go crazy when a goal gets scored. And part of the experience is, I guess, to kind of explain what I'm saying, it was a lot more satisfying to me as a viewer and as a hockey fan to watch Tampa Bay lift the cup this time and skate around in front of their fans, as opposed to last year when they're just, it's empty arena, they're celebrating amongst themselves. A lot more rewarding for me as a viewer, and I guarantee it was a lot more rewarding for them as players. And then the other big thing I'm gonna take away from this season, I kind of like the taxi squad. I don't know that it's super I don't know that it's super practical going forward, at least to the extent that it is, but having 3 goalies on hand, I think that's helpful. You're gonna run into less emergency goalie situations, and
we still got one of those. Didn't
exactly,
we still get an emergency goalie situation? Which you gotta love it every time it comes up. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine. No, you're fine. But no, I think that's something that they can definitely look into potentially implementing, and just, even if it just comes down to just increasing your overall roster size, the amount of slots that you can have. Because I think that players, there are some players that either got looks that they might not have gotten before, or players that were able to be with a team. Like Corey Perry was on the taxi squad most of this season for Montreal, and then he played a big role for them in the playoffs. That doesn't happen necessarily if Montreal doesn't have a taxi squad to stash him on from the get-go. So I think having situations like that is a reason why I'd actually like to see some form of the taxi squad carry on past this season.
I think that's an awesome take, for one. The only thing I have against that take is how frustrating it was to see some people sit on the taxi squad for a good chunk of the year. You're like, they're that close, they're not playing there, get them in. And so that was the one thing that, although I would also love, I think that's a great point. It drove me crazy sometimes just to see some people just sitting on the taxi squad and not getting that playing time.
And maybe that
rendition of it would be cool though. Like at the AHL level, it was a nightmare having to deal with that. But if they could figure out how to streamline it where it didn't hurt the lower leagues,
for sure,
go for it. Yeah.
And maybe they do it. That adds an extra wrinkle to how you create your roster, right? Because I don't think it makes sense to have your young kids sitting on the taxi squad. So then maybe you go out and you specifically sign veterans like a Corey Perry to have on that taxi squad. Maybe not Corey Perry specifically, but it just adds an extra element.
You could if you wanted to.
Well, for sure, and that'll bring you to the that'll get you to the final. It won't win you the cup. That's Pat Maroon. But I digress.
It's true.
I wonder if anyone would take Bert for Maroon.
I
wonder if we could make that trade happen. Boy.
Yeah. Don't give Tampa Bay ideas.
Bert, Cholowski, and maybe 3 other guys.
I like it. Well, good stuff. Really good perspectives. I'll be interested to see if they do anything at all with any sort of semblance of a taxi squad, because I agree. Although Svechnikov, Devin, that was,
hurts my heart.
That said, again, Rachel, thank you so much. Really appreciate every time you come on the show. You're always welcome, and appreciate your expertise and just your overall knowledge.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you guys for watching at home. Don't forget, like, subscribe, comment. Not gonna lie, I'm calling everybody out. I was a little disappointed in the lack of comments on our last show. So let's get some comments. Call me out. Let's do it. We love engaging with you guys and talking about it next week. So again, that's our show. We'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us.